Good afternoon, everyone. This is Wanda Minnick with the Florida Head Start Association. We are going to begin the call at 12. It is currently 11:52. I wanted to go ahead and get signed in a little early just to make sure all my technology was in proper order before we began the call. I hope everyone is doing well. Hey, Sabrina.
Hi, Wanda. Hi, everyone.
I'm trying to unmute myself.
It was fun. Well, listen,
I was like, I promise, I'm trying. Oh my goodness. It's been one of those days. So I do want to throw out this huge caveat. My mother-in-law passed away on Sunday, so I'm kind of in between various relatives' homes right at this moment, so I can help with this call. So it's been a crazy couple of days.
Thank you very much for your help and for suggesting and going along with this, which I hope will be helpful to folks on the phone. But
yeah. Yes, me too. Can you see my screen, or do you want me to give you control, Kevin, or what would you prefer?
It looks fine. I put in a couple of really lame animations on the next couple of pages just to sort of highlight things. So it might make sense to turn over control to me just so I can pop those up. It would be good.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to do make you host, and you want me to stop my screen share?
Oh yeah, that would be good, because then I'll start my screen.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I turned that over to you, so make sure you get that.
Okay. All right. Does that look like your screen did?
I don't see it yet.
Screen on my side, don't I? Let's see here. see waiting. Oh, that's you. Let's see. Oh, passed up. No, I don't want to. Trying to click in a benign place, and it's asking people to unmute and stuff. Here we go. Share screen. Okay. And there we go. Sharing your face would be strange because there we go. Yes. Okay. There. Now does that look okay?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm so polished. It's amazing. Yes. There. Oh, there we go. Okay. And should we start in just, I guess we have a couple of minutes left because everybody's good and getting on early. So.
Yeah, I went ahead and logged in early because I was afraid that I wasn't sure of all the technology I had at my disposal in the various homes I'm in.
I'm starting to get really cavalier about it just because I'm so used to it. I hear other people talk about Zoom burnout, but it's like my life just became so much easier the last 6 months from this,
Yeah.
Just being able to reach out to people, bidding for things, being able to sort of put a face with the project and, sort of just, better exchanges. And I think that here, one of the things I think will be very helpful for everyone who's muted here is just to sort of, talk about what the project's meant to do, sort of what we've been doing that works with other states, and of course, seeing if, there's sort of real concerns because I do know that this survey is, a bit longer than what you've had before. But as of course, I'll have it on a slide later, but you're ahead of Alabama. You've got 25 programs participating now after I sent out the reminder this morning. And Alabama's got 15 right now, I think. I said you're on the same timing now. So, but we're getting good participation. It's just, been, picking up slowly. So.
Hey, Kevin, we did have a comment that someone's having a hard time hearing you. They can hear me fine. So you may want to adjust your volume just a tad.
Okie dokie. I will put this closer to my mouth, which is always helpful. And I think I can adjust my own volume, although usually that's my inbound as opposed to outbound. So, and I could also talk more loudly too. So, geez, come on, dude.
All right.
There we go. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so that is up. And so hopefully, of course, I'm also mumbling. So there we go. There. Oops, stop that. I stole this from a partner. It looked really pretty. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah, it's so weird. Sometimes I work with other people and I realize that everybody wants spiffy graphics and stuff like that. So I go, oh, okay, well, there you go. So. I'm admitting your people too, if you don't mind, because I'm not sure who's got responsibility over that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just anyone can join us. So, and
hey, Wanda.
Hey, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Good morning. I mean, good afternoon already.
It's morning out. Yeah, it's nice.
Nice to see everybody.
Yes, it is. All right, so I have that it's right at noon, so we'll go ahead and begin the call. Good afternoon, everyone. Wanda Minnick with the Florida Head Start Association. Thank you all for joining us today. As you know, we have with us Kevin Wharton with Wharton Marketing and Research. He is going to talk to us a little bit about this, the wage study survey that we're doing in the state of Florida. We do this every 3 years with the association, and we can't do it without your input. So without further ado, I'm going to just turn it on over to Kevin and let him get the party started.
Thank you so much, Wanda. And, the purpose for our call today, we obviously have had invitations and reminders out for some time, but what we wanted to do is just to sort of give you an opportunity to ask questions.
Hi, good morning.
Oh, hey, Brenda. Is it possible for you to mute yourself at all? Or... Okay.
Okay.
But
that
just,
meeting has ended. I'm in another meeting.
Hang on just a second. If everyone can take a moment to please mute your line if you're not talking. The only one that should have their line unmuted is Kevin at this time. And Kevin, if you don't mind to adjust your volume just a tad, it's still kind of hard to hear you.
Okay, gotcha. I'll speak a little more loudly because I don't think the volume is impacting that. But just to sort of give you an overview, and hopefully this is loud enough. You know, at this point in our schedule, this is a pretty normal administration for us. I've done these surveys for probably 8 state Head Start associations, and of course you are one of them now. And what we did is we launched this project back in September 16th, and what we've been doing is sending out reminders to folks who haven't started a survey about every 6 days since then. The first invitation included a PDF because we wanted to give you sort of a sense for what it was we were going to be asking for, so that way you could prepare a response before you actually sat down at the computer and started it. Although the survey tool is also designed to let you leave as long as you just click save at the bottom of a screen. That's also very important because I realize, as we'll talk about the design in the next page or two, that what it does, it gives you a chance to leave and then come back and pick up where you left off, or go back if you need to, if you've skipped forward a few pages. But where we are today is we're going to be sending out a final reminder on October 15th, or October 5, I'm sorry, next Monday. And in the interim, I've been sending notes to a few folks who have incomplete surveys. I get some feedback that way if anyone's hung up on a specific question. And of course, that's why we're doing this conference call as well. But our final deadline for now, and that we could change that to allow a few stragglers, is going to be next Friday, October 9th, because we've had it open for just about a month by that point. So far, we're reasonably pleased with what we have. We got 25 programs in Florida have at least started a survey. I looked at each one that was incomplete, and it looks like a lot of them are just kind of in progress, people working through them. And so, of course, this might be an odd time to sort of talk about the formats and making sure folks understand what kind of data that we're looking for. But then at the same time, or just really a week later, Alabama had contacted me some time ago, and we're doing a survey, and we just chose to make it like identical to yours. And so later when we do the reporting, we could also do some comparisons, certainly for Alabama folks to see what overall Florida wage and salary are, and of course in vice versa as well. But after this, I'm going to be going through just a couple of steps. I may be in touch with some of you who are doing the survey, because sometimes people answer strangely, and that could be a function of how clear or unclear the question was. But really common things we tend to see is when we ask for an annual salary or wage, the salary will get reported as, say, a weekly or monthly figure sometimes instead of an annual, those sort of things. And of course there'll be ways that I have to sort of just tinker with that after we've closed the survey, just to make sure that everything we report out is normal. I mentioned leave here as well in the benefits section. Sometimes leave is answered kind of strangely. And so, a lot of times folks don't fill in like the little line for total, for example. And we just try to make sure that we're actually, sort of answering, make sure that everyone's sort of answering in a consistent manner. But later on, just to sort of give you a sense for what we'd be sharing with you, our goal, and in fact, our target in the contract, is to get, our first deliverables to everybody for review by the small focus group of members who have been advising Wanda on this by October 30th. So, between, October 9th when we cut this off and October 30th, that gives me 3 weeks to sort of contact you if I have any questions, go through, plug this stuff into a crosstab software program. I'll show you what the crosstabs look like later, just to give you a quick sense of overview. But our goal is, of course, to make sure that we're reporting for you, not just sort of the high level, hey, this is, what this particular position is being paid in the statewide. Obviously there's regional patterns. There's going to be differences sometimes in terms of what you can pay based on your size of program and things like that. And so, those are all the kind of analytical things I'll be giving you. And then on the back end, I'll give you a report, the executive summary, probably the graphic slides, although it depends on the state as to who really wants what. And a lot of times, because sometimes I'm working with like an HR analyst or a financial analyst, I'll go ahead and put the crosstabs and sometimes data tables into a spreadsheet and go ahead and share that with you. My goal is never to dump too much, but I just want to make sure that you're getting the overview, the report, and then you're also getting other tools that come in handy. Usually the graphics are just gravy and they're embedded in the report anyway. so. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide, and then I'll open the table for questions in a couple of minutes, or if something strikes you now. You know, I think maybe many of you have seen, you know, the survey tool already. This is like the Word version, or basically, you know, the quote unquote guide that I shared with everybody in advance. But just to sort of, you know, guide a little bit of our talking points, what I wanted to do is sort of just make sure that we cover some of the things that sometimes people are a little bit confused by. Up here at the top, the upper left, you know, we wanted to make sure that we collected, you know, metrics for the program. Sometimes I'm approached by, I think they're called CAPS in most places, you know, community action programs, and organizations that are larger than, you know, just a Head Start or an early Head Start program. And so I think we've been able to achieve some understanding there. But, you know, oftentimes, if possible, we want to get a sense for how big the program is you're reporting. And so sometimes these sort of umbrella groups, and sorry if my terminology is a little bit not very Floridian, but sometimes these very large groups really sort of should be broken down, because, you know, the biggest reason I ask these questions is, number one, to give you some financial metrics on the back end. For example, calculating ratios for the operating budget, you know, per staff, you know, per student, you know, those sort of things. And then also, of course, making sure we can sort of categorize, you know, programs according to, say, small, medium, large, you know, but using sort of the distribution of size in your state so that we can deal with that. And then also, of course, one thing that doesn't appear here, I'd mentioned region. I know who you are because of how the survey tool works. It creates a personalized link, you know, when we actually send the invitation. And so I always know who you are. A survey is not anonymous, it's just confidential. Confidentiality, of course, allows me to get back in touch with you if there's a really weird response, or to send you know, a reminder to you and say, hey, thank you for starting the survey, but we hope that you can complete more of it, or send a reminder to someone who really hasn't started. One other just little tidbit in terms of just the distribution is, I'd asked Wanda to give me if there's, you know, sort of a single contact per grantee, or if there are multiple appropriate ones. Every now and then we're actually sending a survey link to a couple of people to increase our batting average and the likelihood that we're going to reach the right person. Once I see a response in my system from someone who seems to be filling out quite a bit of it, in other words, you're not just kicking the tires, or they opened it by mistake, then at that point what I do is I go ahead and delete the other record or duplicate record, so that there's no likelihood that someone's, you know, two different people in the same program are trying to fill out a survey. But those are just some of the little things that we sort of try to take into account. And then, of course, you know, again, we can also report results by demographic breakdowns, program type, these kinds of things. Also unionized programs, although I don't think there's too many of those from what I've seen in the preliminary data that I can run reports on. But the next part of the survey, and this is the part where I get a lot of questions from folks both in Florida and from other states that we do, is that we ask for staffing to try to get a sense for how many people are in specific positions. At some level, this is kind of ludicrous. I mean, chances are you don't have more than one CEO, and of course, depending on sort of your overall program structure, you might be reporting as, say, a program director, a Head Start, without telling us, you know, what someone at a higher, you know, sort of echelon is making. In fact, you may not even know. But beyond these ones where, you know, there's sort of like ones is just very normal, we're also always interested in reporting back to you, what's your education staff structure like? You know, by the time we get down into the education on the lower left-hand side, we are asking for full-time equivalents, we're asking for FTEs, but of course what we're doing is we're drawing a distinction between the levels of positions. So teachers are stratified in three categories: bachelor's degree or higher, an associate's degree, or high school or GED, a general equivalent, having been earned, you know, with or without certification. I do this differently in different states, but it's almost always the same sort of approach. And of course, teacher assistants, we also stratify. And so here, you know, you got about, you know, 11 categories of education staff. We do want to sort of know more about your staff structure in that area. And in general, you know, just sort of how many administrative and other support staff you kind of have in the overall program. Sometimes when we do debriefings, we do final presentations, I get a lot of questions about that, where people said, yeah, I knew I was filling out this survey, but I would was much more curious now about sort of staffing structure and how we do sort of allocate positions across the overall program. But the most important thing of this section, and like I said, a lot of times I'll get questions from people saying, well, if we work 10 months out of the year in some positions and 12 in others, should I call this person a 0.8 of an FTE? And for me, that's an overthink. I always appreciate the thoughtfulness where people are diligently trying to give us what we need. But at one level, the biggest purpose for me, other than just understanding rough staff structure, is then to trigger the next screen to make it easier for you to fill out the section on composition of staff. And so one of the things we ask here is, of course, if you have no staff, don't click on it. My system is smart enough to be able to measure a 0 response and not go to the next section under composition or composition, geez, let's just say compensation, I'm sorry. I guess I'm allowed one mistake per presentation or per project, but at least the actual project doesn't say that on the survey tool. But what we're looking for here, and I just sort of saved you the gory detail of showing all these, but what the survey tool does, it shows every position that you said you have at least 0.1 FTEs on the previous screen. So that way you can just sort of see your structure, work through it from a practical standpoint. It's meant to make it easier just to go ahead and fill it in, fill in the ones come back later, fill in more of them, that sort of thing. But what we always try to do with these reports is to make sure that, number one, we've got your annual salary or wage. Yeah, we could have two different fields up here in the upper right to capture that. But of course, I can tell when you're answering in a small figure or a large. And so when I do the final analysis, I go ahead and separate those out in a spreadsheet and then do consistency checks and stuff like that afterwards. We will ask you, what's the basis of the salary generally for that position. And of course, here, once again, like an ED or a principal or a CEO, you're only going to have one if you have one. For many of these other cases, like let's say you've got 8 teachers 2 or 9 teachers 3 on your staff, what we ask for are both the annual average salary or wage, whichever you're paying, and then we're also asking for the average years of related experience. And of course, we define it in the survey as years of Head Start related, because we also want you to be able to at least get a sense of profile in the final report, where if you go through your analysis and you say, well, that's interesting, we're paying about 15% less than the average Florida program. Well, for hints as to whether you're sort of still in alignment, you can see that the number of years, if you're, sort of churning through, perhaps you have higher turnover and, less average tenure for that position. That's an important clue to sort of help adjust your sort of estimates from it. So that's why we ask for that. And we ask for the average hours worked per year by staff in that position. We do that so that we can do a conversion for the salaries and wages. In any of these surveys, if we're really lucky, I think we'll have 50 responses from Florida by the time this is all done. Well, if we have 50 and we're trying to report breakdowns and things like that, it becomes very important for us to be able to have both a wage figure and a salary figure if, say, there's a position for which you all are paying 50-50 or saying wages versus salary. So in the final report, if we've got, 50 respondents, 50 programs participating, 40 of them say that they've got a specific position, you'll see an N of 40 for both the wage and the salary, but the wage could be a wage equivalent. The salary could be a salary equivalent by multiplying the wage figure that you give me by the number of hours you indicate there in the upper right. So it's not a finely oiled machine, but it is something that just tries to make sure that we use all these little stupid data tricks to give you the best possible report afterwards. And then I'm going to look up at the comments and chat to see if I'm missing anything at this point, and then to turn it over to, pause for comments as well in case anyone wants to unmute in a moment. The one thing that I did in inheriting the program, because like Wanda said, you all do this in Florida every 3 years, what I did is saw that the last report had a very different staff structure. And in fact, one of our mild concerns here is that the fact that we've only got 25 programs participating so far might be the length of the survey, because we are going more granular in terms of positions, but we found this to be much more convenient for a lot of folks who sort of need to know for a specific position what's that person being paid, as opposed to sort of lumping some of these specific job descriptions into sort of a single category. Easier to report, a little bit harder to use, I think. So so let me see the pause share. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, here we go, chat. So I can see if there are some comments here, and I'll make sure that I've gotten to you. And sorry that I missed your comments before about the quiets as well. I guess that's what most of these are. Now, when you're saying it's the adjusting salaries is referring to COLA or summer changes, on these, I think that if I understand correctly, we do ask about the percentage increase, and we're really looking for any change whatsoever that's occurring over a calendar year. And because it's on the next page of the survey, I'll try to touch on that just a little bit more. But then also in Julie's question, where would you want us to include the staff, the deal with eligibility, outreach, recruitment, and enrollment? Now we have we did have the ERSCA category here. I'm doing a couple of these around the country, and I'm just trying to make sure. I don't know if anybody else would be able to help answer that question, because I'm not the best guy to really answer when it comes to staff structure, but hopefully this is not a position that would have to get lumped under other staff. Sometimes if we don't have the perfect set of job descriptions, for better or for worse, we encourage folks just to not report the data so they're not wasting their time if their positions are so different. But does anyone else have any observation here in terms of the eligibility, outreach, recruitment, and enrollment? Because it is kind of interesting that here, as we compared your old structure, looked at what other states have been doing lately, we didn't include that. But I don't know if Wanda might want to, sort of pipe in on that at least. Yeah.
Kevin, I'm right where I'm not sure myself. So if there's anybody else on the call that could to talk us through that, that would be most helpful.
And but in the meantime, and like I said, it's so we're considerate of everyone's time. The short answer is, of course, we don't know. This could reflect the fact that we just simply didn't have the best and most comprehensive listing of positions. But you also have a second question, which is absolutely critical, that I always try to stress, at least in the instructions here. This year, for example, I'm not quite sure why I didn't put as much in instructions. But what we do is we encourage folks to tell us, or if there's a position that really falls across a couple of categories, if they're 0.5 FTE or 0.3 FTE, because they're really sort of a person who logically could be allocated in 3 different roles. What we always encourage people is to report their full salary in each of the blanks, but to tell us under staffing, under this question 5, tell us that the FTEs is I think it goes out to 2 decimals, so you can always do 0.33. It doesn't matter, because I'll just adjust that stuff on the back end. But what we always look for there, Julie, is just to have people tell us their full salary, because when I report it back to you, for example, the grid that I'll put a lot of the detail in will show the figures from the upper right. It'll show the average, both mean and median salary, annual salary, the wage equivalent, again, computed if the person's paid one way or the other. It'll include, just for profiling and comparison purposes, what their average years of experience are and those average hours worked. So what would happen in terms of how you might be filling out the line for a person who really falls into 2 positions is you'd probably tell us that they're working about 900 hours, for each of those 2 roles, and that would be my trigger to my signal that it's a position being split across a couple of roles. But we'd still want to be able to report their full salary, because of course that's what you'd be paying someone based on their job description. And hopefully when I show some of the tables and things like that, it'll also be somewhat clear, but we definitely want you to report full salaries for each, or else I'll be back in touch. If I do the sort of typical outlier treatment and go, whoa, that's really low pay, I can infer from the fact that it's a 0.5 FTE that I need to sort of inflate it, but I'll always check with you before I do that when I'm in that data hygiene stage before I produce reports for you. And you're very welcome. And also, Sherry, for yours as a CAP agency, here, what I always recommend that folks do, and again, these are judgment calls. This is a tool that we're doing for your benefit. And so in a sense, you're really not managing your salaries to, sort of a purpose. You don't have any sort of real influence probably to adjust a person who's like higher in the hierarchy or strata for you. But for people who are indirect staff who are employed by the CAP, who are not necessarily directly related to EHS or HS programs, it's okay to not report them. It's okay for your FTEs to exclude them if you wish. They may be sort of working for you, but you can make the judgment call on which positions you want to report. I do this all the time with small company associations where, you know, the CEO is going to say, well, I don't really care what I make because I know what I make and I have the influence over that. I want to know how much I pay my staff. I don't always like it when we can't report comprehensively, but on the other hand, you got to draw a line somewhere to try to make it as simple as possible to answer. So I think that if that helps, that's kind of the philosophical way that I tend to look at it. I think those are the best answers I can offer you at this point. I'll leave that chat box up there. And thank you for the kudos on speaking louder. Usually once I stop mumbling, I'm pretty okay. Just to continue very briefly here for the rest of the survey, because again, you know, sort of going just, you know, sequentially through it can sometimes sort of identify any questions that folks might have, or I can simply proactively tell you. One of the things we've tried to do more recently is to focus on sort of what your HR problem might be. And so we look not only here at the lower corner, question 7, for what's your staff turnover. You know, we're looking at what your turnover was on a year-by-year basis. It is very tempting to say, hey, pre-COVID, post-COVID. I've got a lot of clients who are, you know, sort of pushing for those changes, but, you know, in my mind, it's going to come out anyway. So if you do have some involuntary departures, if you have voluntary departures, if you're doing furloughs where you're cutting or you're cutting back on staff time by 20%, that makes it a little bit muddier. But what we really want is just a ballpark for, you know, how many folks, what percentage of the staff you had a year ago you've retained today, and then what are you doing to influence employee retention. I go ahead and categorize the open-ended stuff that you share with us, you know, share it over a couple of pages, just so that other people can sort of get some ideas from each other. I know through FHSA you probably do roundtables and information sharing and things like that anyway, but we just want to make sure that we're able to share that with you here as well. So, and that click, oh, there we go. So now let's talk about, and these are really, these 4 pages, or you know, 2 screens are really sort of it as far as the survey itself. But just to make sure that we've covered all the important things, you know, we wanted to talk about unionized staff. We wanted to talk about whether you pay a premium for staff who are bilingual, sort of special topics, operational, if you will, here. But then one of the things that we try to do, and I mention this because sometimes it becomes a little bit problematic from my standpoint, is we ask for which of the following you pay for your staff or you make available. Here, we're not really asking, okay, well, you make it available, but nobody uses it. That's, to me, kind of a different animal. We just want to know sort of what's the richness and the composition of your benefits mix. And of course, what we do is we include, you know, differentiation for insurance for your employee, and then, of course, in turn, for their employee dependents and family for each of these categories. I caught this before, and I looks like I didn't do it in this document, but of course we also ask medical insurance for employee benefits or dependents and family in the survey itself. You know, this is just the word mock-up that we provided folks up front to, you know, manage your expectations and give you a sense for what we're asking about. But then when we get down a little bit lower, you know, we ask about whether you offer matching contributions or whether you offer a pension plan, you know, just trying to get a sense for sort of what you're doing in those areas, just in terms of the benefits. And then of course, bonuses are so rare in our field. I don't know why we include it, but a few people still do make it available. But we're looking for, you know, tuition assistance, a little bit lower, looking at reimbursement for credentials and things. Here, it's important, if you can, to go ahead and check for each of the 4 categories of staff, where we're looking at part-time year-round from the right, other full-time staff, teachers, and then what we call executive and managerial staff with supervisory responsibility, because we're really just trying to draw a distinction between these sort of different groups. And Stacy, on that count, I think that a COLA is really, in my mind, a raise, whereas a bonus is generally going to be something that is performance-based. Let's say that the institution accomplishes many of its goals, and of course, those could be simply sustainability or things like that. So yeah, we definitely want to try to draw that distinction if we can. It's interesting here because I could have sworn that we had a question for what percentage change was actually being offered. I'm going to go backwards for a moment because I could have sworn that we did. God, that's funny. That would be, oh, here we go. Yeah, way up top. You know, in the upper left-hand corner, we said, what's your average salary increase this year? Please use a decimal if appropriate. Stacy, that is where I would put that COLA or any sort of just average change. Yeah, admittedly, we're not asking much detail there when we're asking for a lot of gory detail when it comes to compensation, but usually we find that these percentage changes really don't fluctuate a whole lot, except maybe for meeting some merit criteria and evaluations and things like that. So hopefully that one figure will get us there. But then a little bit lower, what we ask people is to tell us, and this was something that the focus group had guided us on. And so if some of these cases, you'll see these cute little logic things where if a person checked the 16th down, offer paid leave at termination, if they did check that box, then they're asked for the different, the 4 levels of staff, how many maximum days of paid leave do you offer staff when they're terminated, if that time has been accrued. And so that's like a maximum figure. And then below that, proportion of the benefits, the cost you actually offer. This is really meant to be sort of a percent of premium. It should be a value between 0 and 100%. I realize that sometimes, we make available some of the sort of more obscure, insurance programs like, vision insurance would probably be a good example. Here we're asking, what do you pay for employees? Again, in all these cases, we could go into more detail, which I chose not to. And so if you're offering both, say vision insurance for employees and for employee dependents family, you may have the same rule of thumb for covering both premiums, but we're just asking here for what percentage of the premium do you pay for the employees. So again, the employee could be paying 50% and you pay 50%, but that's really what we're shooting for there. Haven't gotten many questions about that, so I assume that it's been fairly clear to everybody, but I don't want to overkill it, but just want to touch on it too. Now, the upper right one is probably the question that I get the most questions from you all, just in terms of how we should answer. These are sometimes I'll see a figure where people will give me the total as opposed to the average. And so oftentimes I might be back in touch if I cannot infer from you what are your total full-time teachers or your total part-time seasonal, because of course then I'll just need a denominator to go ahead and take that. Now for the sliding scale for premiums, what I would say there, Stacy, is if it's not too awkward, because I know for this particular question, sometimes people ask me to convert it to an alpha where you can, for example, enter 35 to 45%. I would just take the midpoint. If you have 2 different practices there and you're covering 60% of the premium, or you're covering 80% of the premium for different employees based on tenure or something like that, I would just report the midpoint, report the 70%, because that's what I'm going to do on the back end anyway, because I'm always accustomed to reporting averages for that. But that's a great question. The other things that we wanted to make sure we covered, this is kind of akin, question 12B was just like early on when we were asking about what's your average increase in salary for the year. We want to get a sense for what your year-to-year change has been in both your total costs that you're spending on benefits and then the total cost you're spending just for the health benefits and the health insurance primarily. So we do look for those 2 figures. Sometimes there is a real difference, so we still keep those split out. And then we just want to know what structure. And of course, we realize you could have multiple plans in your program. And when you have those plans, I'll actually have this display based on what you've answered before. If you have a PPO, is it extended to spouse, children, other family members, or to nobody? That nobody on the right-hand side is always very helpful for me. I'm going to go check it. If you don't check it and you've indicated you've got a PPO, but you haven't checked anything in the column, sometimes I'll check with you, but a lot of times it's just very simple to look at the data and say, oh, okay, they meant to say that means none, because we just need to have the denominators correct when we report back to you. We are asking for deductible levels. I thought that was kind of an interesting question that was first asked in I think actually the Oregon relief nurses, the last time I did one of these projects a couple of months ago. But then, that should be fairly straightforward. And like I was saying before, if you have a PTO system in question 15, and I'll come back, Sabrina, to 12 in a moment. But for 15, what we're looking for here is, do you have PTO, or, vacation or sick leave? Sometimes we'll actually ask people if you have one of those, and then of course it'll show like a different category. And I think that FHSAs and FSAs. I'm not sure how to answer that, Stacy, on that question about tracking HSAs the same as FSAs. I think that you could, but unfortunately, it's always kind of ironic that a guy who hasn't received any benefits in 20 years is doing your survey. I've been doing this long as an independent consultant, but if anyone can weigh in on that, please unmute. Be happy to hear anyone else drawing a distinction there to where we understand what the difference is. I had not. In fact, we hadn't really touched on FSAs where it depends on the state. I'll see a few folks indicate that as an other under question 13, but yeah, we don't ask as much detail there for better or for worse. So. Now for question 12, it is actually true. I hardly explained that at all. What we were looking for is your overall estimate for your benefits. And of course, ideally, let's say that you're spending, $400,000 a year on benefits program wide, and you've got 100 staff, you should have an average figure of $4,000 per person. Obviously, that's going to differ a lot based on the sort of estimated actual usage. And so I would say for that, what we're looking for is per person, per category. And ideally, it should include, things that you might not think of initially, like workers' comp premiums, retirement contributions that you're doing under a matching program, the cost of providing their health insurance. Sometimes these figures, I know, are hard to compute. Sometimes the guesstimate is better than sort of going out and doing like a calculation, out to the dollar figure. But what we do find sometimes is that these figures come in absurdly high, where it does sound like people are actually telling us how much they think they're spending on their total benefits for, say, all full-time teachers. And that's when I have to go ahead and divide it through. But definitely in that question, we are looking for a per person figure. And of course, there, I guess the only exclusion that we note here is, of course, payroll taxes, which, are just obviously a percent allocation off the total that you're paying them. So hopefully that's a little bit better or easier. And of course, if part-time seasonal, you're not offering any real benefits at all, sometimes, 0 is a valid answer in that category. Let's see, there was oh, here we go. I missed, Julie, your question before with the category of full-time teachers. I would say that should include I would think home visitors, normally the way that people interpret this is that they are other full-time staff. I think originally, years ago when we first started using this kind of structure, we were thinking that the other full-time staff would be like the cooks, the maintenance person, the transportation manager, all those sort of things. But I would think it probably should include the people who are in sort of close to educational categories who are not teachers. So we wanted to keep the second column in question 10 as easy as possible. I don't know if that's the right decision, but it's the decision we've made over time. And so I would think your home visitors and other full-time education staff who are not teaching should still go in column 3 is my judgment call. So, okay. Now, last couple of questions, just simply whether you lay off staff during summer, are they eligible for, unemployment benefits and those sort of things, just yes, no questions. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. But then the last couple of things I wanted to share with you, I forgot my cute little animation, is to give you a sense as to what the next couple of steps are going to be. Because I realize folks on the call could be people who have started a survey, people who thought about starting a survey, or people who've been waiting for a bit. And hopefully there's been a little bit of insight I can share on sort of at least what our intention is, why we're asking questions the way we are. But I wanted to show you what the sample reports look like. This is obviously nowhere near Florida, and of course it's also not Head Start programs, but we found that people in other fields kind of like this structure enough to where I can still give you a sense as to what the report looks like. Simple table of contents, just stresses. Look, we'll do graphical summaries for you for your overall program file, those or program profile, the financial ratios, all those sort of things. It's talking about staffing structure next to give you a sense for who's got what and how many average staff they have in the positions and how many of them actually report having specific positions, which is helpful, especially with education staff. But for compensation, we wanted to tell you a little bit more in-depth analysis on who is sort of providing above average compensation increases or below average. And then what we wanted to do is give you the gory detail in terms of the average annual salary and hourly wage or wage equivalents. And I mentioned starting wages there. That was from their survey. You wouldn't see that in this particular survey. And then some of the position profiles, that's where, of course, as we're asking about the different kinds of Florida certifications and the few national certifications we had there, average experience, education level, that sort of thing will appear there. And then benefits we talk about in a lump. And then at the end of the survey, I show you just a sample of that because again, we know that sometimes it's kind of a mechanical exercise. What we do is share with you what the average and then sort of broken down by, geography, by program size and type and that sort of thing. And we'll give you that detail for the compensation and a little bit about their experience and hours worked. This is just a capture of just a couple of pages in the middle. I always try to do these in a graphical format too. Mean and median oftentimes are two slightly different things. The median is a midpoint of all the responses if you sort them in descending or ascending order. So, we go ahead and try to get the quote unquote typical response there. The mean is, of course, what most of us think of as the average. It's the arithmetic average, where you take all of the responses and you summarize them and divide them by the number of people who answered. So usually, both of them sort of have their own advantages. Most of the time you'll see a bigger difference than this. And so we try not to confuse the issue, but still to give you both a narrative and to talk a little bit about, the rest of the results. Now, Sabrina, you have a question here about how to go back into the survey to complete. If you want to, return to your survey, all you have to do is revisit Wanda's message to you. That message will have a link to your survey. And so if you click on it, the system, looks for you, recognizes you based on the unique link. And so it'll either, if you've completed the survey, it'll give you this little gobbledygook thing about, hey, welcome back. If you want to change anything, just click OK. But in reality, probably you've stopped at the compensation page. You click on that link and it'll just go ahead and let you pick up right there. But the navigation at the bottom is still important. If there's a part of it that you didn't fill out, you go ahead and keep clicking the previous button, or you click the next button at the bottom, or you click save, of course, after you've done some more work. But it should be pretty straightforward. But the key thing is you just click the link from the invitation, because that's how you get back into your survey. So pretty straightforward after the first time that you do it. Of course, nothing's intuitive up front, and I totally get that. But you can see from the second page here, this is where we do the wage equivalents. They're not really divided by a figure, they're divided by the figure you give us for hours for each person. And so if you actually sat there with a calculator, you might say, well, hey, the education specialist, $43,694, median is divided by $20.97. That's going to have a different figure per position, because each of these positions will have a slightly different average hours worked. But again, we just want to give you the two figures that we can, that we think most people look for, a mean and a median, and then in turn, both a salary and then a wage or a wage equivalent. And so that'll be repeated for the different categories of positions. But then I also wanted to share with you, the left-hand side is a detailed spreadsheet that I, can share with people. Generally, they don't want it for logical reasons. But what it does do is it shows how I'm looking at your data once we get this into visualization software after all the data is clean. And starting from the left-hand side, you'll see that, and I do this differently for each program. Obviously, many of you have more than 100 FTEs. But here, what I did is I just went ahead and took the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, where they had 20 respondents. So they had 20 respondents out of 25 programs. So we felt pretty good about it. It is what it is. It's just simply information sharing. But we divided up to where like roughly a third each would be in these different categories. Same for budget ranges, which in their case, relatively small, 1 to 3 million, greater than 3 million. Number of children in their programs, in their case, 4 regions around the state. And then that demographics, where most of them are in rural areas. In your case, it might be a little bit different. And then program type, except yours will be more granular. There'll be more variety here. But you can see then that everything in the survey just sort of gets populated going down, where, the ratios I was talking about calculating before, like your annual budget divided by the number of children served. In their cases, they draw a distinction between children and families, which is probably inappropriate because they're almost the same figure. But we go ahead and go down to where you can see, for example, means and medians are still shown here in the detail, and then percentages for what percent of people responded, column percents where they add to 100%. If it was a check only one, if it's a multiple choice, it'll add to more than 100%. But again, just trying to give you a sense for the distribution of folks that answer. This is what I use to write the report. A lot of times what I do is I sort of look for meaningful differences in this, and then write about that in bullets and things like that in the narrative, to where there's some real value, not just the sports story where I say, hey, 45% say this. And then finally, I had mentioned in the report, the actual document, there's a section here where, what I provide for is a summary. This is a little bit less granular because, hey, with only 20 programs, there's only so much we can really share with you. But what we did is we show the mean and the median salary for the position, in this case, the CEO, and we do one of these pages for all 50-ish positions that you have. And then we do the wages the same way, wage or wage equivalent, mean hours, and the mean years in which the person has worked in the program. This should give you a really nice way to sort of apply it. This is the part that when I submit it to you in a spreadsheet, it's a little bit easier to use because, frankly, most of us care about, hey, look, no, I'm a large program and I'm in the panhandle. I mean, so in this report, you'll see those kind of breakdowns. It'll make it a lot easier for you to kind of, quote unquote, find yourself in the report. But that's pretty much it on my side. You all have been really good about using the Zoom chat. If you'd like to unmute, if you have any specific questions, love to answer those. Hopefully I didn't beat everything to death in really, really gory detail, but we really wanted to sort of use this as an opportunity to kind of humanize the process, make it as simple as possible, sort of explain the reasoning behind it, and also to answer any specific questions you may have. So I'll just go ahead and turn it over, back to Wanda, and of course to any of you who might have questions at this point. And just want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak about this. I always like to try to walk people through as early in the field work as possible, so we can address any concerns you might have. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your expertise and kind of going through the survey point by point to educate our folks about completing it. So the floor is yours. If you have any questions, this is your opportunity to either raise your hand or type them in the chat before Kevin leaves us. We still have a few more moments of his time. I would take advantage. Give it a few more minutes, let people think about it. And in the meantime, I did record this, so I will share this recording back out to you if you need to go back through it and re-listen to it or share it with your folks that were not able to join us. Feel free to do that as well. So it looks like you did a really good job, Kevin. We have no more questions.
Well, again, thank you very much for having me, Wanda. Thank you, everyone, and looking forward to getting more responses and having a really good report to share with everybody in the time frame that we shared at the beginning. So just want to say thank you and hope you all have a great day. So yeah.
Yes, thank you as well. And again, if something comes up after the fact, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can definitely funnel those questions over to Kevin for you. So hope everyone has a great rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.